Hello and welcome to Centre Never Apart. I am Michael Venus and I'm with Charlie David, who is the director of the film you just watched, Positive Youth. Welcome, Charlie.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again.
Yes, again. This is part 2. Hopefully there's more. To start things off, why don't you explain what was the motivation and reason you wanted to create this film?
I had met with Logo, which is a TV network in the US. It's a queer network down there. I used to do a show with them called Bump that was also on OTV Canada, a travel show. And we were kind of wrapping up that show and they wanted to know what I was looking to do next. And I wanted to direct, and documentaries were interesting to me. So we started talking about topics, and this one of a rise in HIV transmission in young people came up. And it kind of scared me because I felt like, okay, do I know enough to tackle that? Where am I going to find people who are willing to be part of this? Lots of fears came up, but that's also how I felt it was probably a good topic to tackle because it was a little bit scary.
Right. Was it hard finding people to talk about this story?
It was. I mean, I started, as I generally do with my documentaries, with my social circle first, and reaching out to friends and family, and but there was a lot of hesitation, understandably, for people to publicly disclose status and talk in a very outspoken way about it. I mean, there was fear to become, kind of a poster child for this thing that holds so much stigma still, and especially for a young person. So it took some time and a few trips and reaching out to community organizations before starting to find people who said yes. And even with those yeses, there's often hesitancy, a lot of questions, a lot of like, how are we going to do this? How's it going to be handled? Yes, I will, but caveat, not my mother, or that type of thing.
Yeah, so there was challenges in casting the people. I mean, you really showed a diverse range of youth. So was that important to you,
It was, and I mean, looking back, I think the missing piece would be a straight young man. That would have been really interesting as well. And we had some connections that originally had said yes and then pulled out. So it became a very kind of queer-centric piece, which I'm totally okay with, but at the same time, in ways, it only kind of further strengthened this idea that already exists that's mentioned, like it's a gay white man's disease, right? So, I mean, especially as I started to dive into some of the statistics and realize that, in Canada, our Indigenous population is at risk, young women are at risk. There's, I think, one stat in there about the African American and Latino communities in the U.S. But, like, at the end of the day, it's like, well, it can happen to any of us, and should it, then how do we engage and move forward with living?
With the straight people that you were almost had as a part of the documentary, what was their hesitation? Was it because the stigma is usually attached to gay men? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's this idea that, okay, well, you must be on the DL then, you must, you're obviously gay then, and you're just not, letting us know. And still, and I think, yeah, and I mean, in ways, I think that's very shocking, but it is, you can imagine as a young person what that must be like to disclose. And, it's this, it's a time in your life where everything is monumental in a way, whether you're looking at, career aspirations or relationship or anything else. And so, yeah, there is a lot of fear about, am I going to get fired if this comes out at work? What will people think? From ideas around slut shaming as well, like kind of this idea of, sex negativity, I suppose. So,
I mean, for me, it was very educational watching this. I'm sure with this journey, it was educational for you as well. What do you feel that you learned creating this film?
I mean, I was almost embarrassed as I went along the journey to realize how much I didn't know in different aspects. Like I kind of thought, well, like I'm a very out gay guy, and
you're
like,
gay.
yeah, I'm gay, and like, I wear the red ribbon at events and blah blah blah. Like, I'm aware. I thought I knew what I needed to know, and the fact is I totally didn't, because I, even in my own social circles, probably shied away from just having a very human conversation with some friends even about, like, what is this? What is this like for you? What's difficult for you? Because I thought it might be uncomfortable. And that sucks, right? Like, when we have those things in life, sometimes it's like those uncomfortable things are what we actually need to talk about the most.
Fully. Do you feel that there's enough resources like this film out there for youth to be aware of, safer sex as well as living with HIV?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We have a lot of community organizations. I mean, when I lived in Montreal, I was surprised. Like, there are, it's a rich and supportive community here. I think sometimes it's just we're in this massive culture shift, I feel, where, we maybe were of the generation where we grew up and we were terrified. There was so much kind of like fear propaganda around sex.
And the unknown, right? With
the
80s and the 90s.
Exactly. What is going to happen? And I pretty much have a target on my back, and this is going to happen to me, and it's going to be the worst thing ever.
Right.
To now, even the change in pornography, like over the past few years, if you look, there's like a real rise in unprotected pornography and a fervid discussion around that. Like, is this okay? Is it bad? Is it and things like PrEP and stuff, and just our condom use. Like, I think as the gay community is certainly having to have new conversations about what's acceptable, what's promotable,
right.
how we each feel about it, and what's comfortable in our own lives, I guess.
Like, do you feel, going back, like when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, like there was definitely, I feel, more education and more urgency to express this? I don't know that is the same, because obviously the disease has changed and we have, more education as well as more medication. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel the differences between, say, from the 80s till now?
Well, I went Catholic school, and so...
So did I.
Yeah, it wasn't a necessarily very sex-positive sex education.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think there are challenges in Quebec, in Ontario. You could go province by province or state by state and look at what is the sex education that's happening in our schools, or what are the sex conversations that are happening at home, right?
Right.
And where does that responsibility lie? So I don't think, I mean, I'm certainly an advocate for more conversation, open questioning. Children should be able to explore and ask, and should be given straightforward, honest answers.
For sure.
That's my feeling around it. And what happens, I think, when there's a lack of education in the home or in the school is that they start to educate peer-to-peer, right? And for example, I was doing a tour with this film in Saskatchewan with different health services groups there, and I remember asking a question about birth control, and one teen girl put up her hand and said, well, yeah, I mean, if I'm on the pill, then, I'm safe against any STI. And I thought, okay, where did you get that info? And she's like, my girlfriend told me. And that's the problem. It's like, okay, if it's not coming out in the classroom, or if it's not happening with parents or, somebody else senior, then they may be misinformed.
Right. Do you feel that the stigma for people living with HIV has changed since, in the 90s and until now? Do you feel?
I feel like it really has, but sometimes it's difficult when we're in a societal bubble like we are here, or we're speaking with people who share our mindsets, and we try to bounce ideas off each other, but, we don't know if we're just kind of if it's just bouncing back. We all, it's kind of, somebody said something to me about this with social media, that like who you follow, it can begin to be almost a tunnel in a way, where we're only hearing back and getting feedback about ideas that we already have, so we're not being pushed or stretched to learn something new. I forget your question now.
About the stigma, like with people
yeah.
living.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, just the stigma of otherness is a very real thing.
Right.
And I mean, most striking for me was having really, like, I can't call it anything but a blessing to meet, like, Christopher in Orlando, and Keisha and Rakia and Owen in Victoria. I mean, and just seeing, like, okay, that socioeconomic, like, difference in their life and what that meant to be living with HIV was a very different thing. And the inherent challenges that went with it. Like when Chris talks about this idea that I have to have a T cell count of X and I have to basically have full-blown AIDS in order to get healthcare support from the state.
Right, which is just...
And you just think, okay, so this is, like, you know, already, you know, he's out of work, etc., and then to have this on top on your head, like when you're 22 years old,
yeah,
crazy.
What were the main intentions creating the film, and do you feel like you've achieved them?
Yeah, it's funny watching back now. I mean, it was to educate. It was trying to create a conversation with young people who may have had, you know, a lot of education on the subject, very little education on the subject, and to begin these conversations and make it okay to talk about, okay to ask questions. And certainly it's an evolving chronic illness, right? That, like, things that are available today weren't available 4 years ago when I made the film.
Right. I mean, so much has changed.
Yeah. So I think I view it as a springboard, certainly not the be-all and end-all.
Right. What other tools do you feel are important for youth, as well as just people in general, to be aware of safer sex as well as to live healthy with HIV?
I think these, I mean, community groups like Youth Co. in Vancouver, that was a really cool one to go and participate with them there, because I think that safe place to be able to talk, to share fears, to ask questions, to get some peer education, or, you know what, I went to this health center, I spoke to this doctor, and that was a very fantastic experience for me, or I learned a lot, or it helped me along the journey. That type of stuff. Beyond, I mean, we can all, in the age of the internet, self-educate. Right. Hugely, but we need these human connections, and especially in a place where you feel
safe.
You need to feel
talk
safe
about it without prejudices and that kind of thing. How did the participants in the film react to actually seeing the film? And was it a positive experience for them? Like, are they happy about being a part of it?
Yeah, initially everybody was very excited. Many of them have gone to different film festivals and done Q&As or, you know, presented in high schools or junior highs and this type of thing. And we did have one of the participants whose courage, I guess, kind of took a hit at one point and said, oh my God, okay, like, it's okay that I'm in this, but I don't want to be on the poster, and please, like, you know, no media around this, because as it came out, then, you know, of course, we started to have radio and newspapers and magazines calling and saying, oh, we want to talk to so-and-so, we want to talk to so-and-so. Right. And I think at that moment, it kind of exploded beyond, oh, this might just be this little thing that's, you know, nobody's really going to see, to
then you're in the spotlight.
Yeah, I don't want that kind of attention around this.
But they're all doing well, and they're all...
Yeah, absolutely. I just spoke with Rakia about a month ago, and she's moved down to, she's doing a master's program in Australia, and Chris is working and reconciled with his mother.
He has? Oh,
yeah.
Good. Good. So did she see the film, and do you know?
I don't know that she's seen the film. He just told me that...
Was he able to come out to her?
Yeah. She now knows about his status, so...
That's good. Wow. Crazy. Okay. Fill us in a little bit about where the film, you were mentioning that it's done some schools, and it's obviously been on Logo. Where else has it played? And
yeah, it started with a fairly healthy film festival run, and then Logo in the States, OutTV Canada, and OutTV in Europe. we did the educational tour in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
It was in the Wolfsonian Museum for a while in Miami. And then I've done some other educational pieces with it in like Concordia and Purdue and Brown University, Wits University in Johannesburg. I was down there last spring, I guess.
Okay.
And that was very interesting too, because to have a conversation about HIV and AIDS, even in South Africa, it was a very different discussion, you know, and I felt that it was a different reality.
And maybe explain why it's a different reality.
Well, for example, one of the last president's wives there got very involved in kind of advocacy around safe sex. But as they were going out and handing out pamphlets with condoms stapled to the side of the pamphlet, they were stapling the condom right through the middle onto the pamphlet. And some of it is like, it depends, like you're having, with anybody, you need to understand what is their life like, what is their baseline, you know?
Yeah.
And for some people who, it's like, I'm not used to wearing a watch. So now to be told that I need to take medication on, you know, with this regularity, et cetera, it's a different challenge. And then I think, I mean, it's a whole other can of worms having, you know, foreign aid coming in and sometimes subsidized drugs and sometimes not. And,
right.
I mean, even with this film, there was a big pharmaceutical company contacted me when we were done, and they wanted to kind of take it over and like, okay, now we're going to use this as an educational tool. But they wanted us to do some re-edits. And I didn't feel like I was at a place where I even was qualified enough to know whether those edits were coming from a good educated standpoint or from a business standpoint. So for example, near the end when Nikki, who is Jesse's sister, says, it's my understanding that he will be better in the long term if he stays off the meds now for as long as possible before starting. And that's like, even now, I think it's kind of a contentious discussion, right? Like around PrEP and stuff. Like, do I go on this medication now when I am healthy and I'm not HIV